Okay, so hello everybody, nice to meet you. I am told you're, sorry, I'm just getting in the right place, so I'm not blocking anything. So you're year 2 students, I think, aren't you? Great. So I will go into a little bit more about kind of myself and my career in a minute in the slides, but it'd be good just to get your names and introduce ourselves. So I'm Laura. Shall I start over here?
Yeah, I'm Clarice.
Clarice. Rose. Emmy. Tori, hello. And then at the back. Sorry, I can't hear you. Nice to meet you. Ifiani. Warda, hi. Chichi. Hi. And then
You come in at a good time.
it was literally your moment. Sorry. Isa. Nice to meet you. And one more. We'll just wait for you to sit down. Mariam. Lovely. Lovely. Okay, so it's a nice group. I think, I wasn't sure of the numbers, so I think what we'll do is some of the things that I've kind of thought about. All right. That's all right, don't worry. No worries. Get yourself comfortable. Some of the things that I've thought about doing maybe in small groups, we might just do as a whole group together, but we'll see how we get on. And yeah, there's a break in the middle, and all I was going to say is if people have questions or they want to make comments, just feel free to put your hand up and the microphone can be passed to you. We don't need to wait for the end of a session or whatever, just say if you think of something at the time, because I obviously know my subject really well, but I don't know how well you know it. So if there's stuff that doesn't make sense or you need explaining a bit more, then feel free to shout. We've got plenty of time, I think. Okay.
Click on the PowerPoint, yeah.
Error already. Okay, so I just thought I'd tell you a bit about my kind of career journey and my journey into social work, just because it's not necessarily the most straightforward route, and I think it's quite nice to hear different ways people have kind of come into the profession. And actually, once you do go into social work, you'll see that people have all sorts of backgrounds. Some people have had, whole careers before they then go into social work in something else. So, but for myself, I never thought of being a social worker at any point in my education. I had intended actually to go and do an art degree. So when I left college at whatever it was, 18, I was planning to do an art degree, and but then I had my first daughter, quite young, sort of not too long afterwards. And when I was looking at going into university, the nursery and the university did not align. It was all a bit difficult, so I kind of shelved that idea, and I thought, okay, I'll go and do a bit of work, and I'll do do that in the future. So I went off and got a job in sort of completely random. A leisure centre it was. So I went and worked in a leisure centre because that was really kind of flexible. And anyway, a job came up next door for what was at the time known as the Youth Offending Team. They call it Youth Justice Service now because it sounds a bit nicer. So there was a job as a receptionist. So I was interested. I sort of went for the job and thought that sounded quite interesting. So I was about 20, I can't remember how old I was, maybe like 22 or something. And so I got that job, and I've just found I was really interested. I found working with the young people really everyday interesting. I loved kind of interacting with them, and I was obviously on the reception doing admin. I would sometimes go to court and do a bit of admin work in the court, and I just found it fascinating. So I sort of decided I wanted to get involved, and my head of service at the time was really supportive of that, so suggested I do some volunteering for the service to get some experience, because I didn't have any experience at all. So I did that. I'd got some experience for a couple of years, and then I was really fortunate, and I did what would now be the equivalent of the apprenticeship in social work. So it was, back then it was called the part-time employment-based route. So I came here 1 day a week and carried on working there sort of 4 days a week. So I started here in January of 20 no, what is it? Not 2025, 2005. So 20 years ago, pretty much exactly, I started at Brunel. It was pretty hard because I was working part-time, and, you know, the workload was pretty much the same as if I wasn't at uni, as is often the way. But, you know, I kept it up. I thought it was a really good opportunity because I didn't come out with any student fees or anything. I was, you know, I kind of was funded to go to university, so it was a brilliant opportunity for me. So I did that. I came here it was the beginning of 2005, and I finished at the end of 2008, so it was pretty much 4 years. That's right. So all alongside that, I worked in youth justice. I did various jobs. It was kind of that kind of team. We could explore different jobs. It was a really nice team. That's all right, don't worry. It was a good service to get involved in. Very supportive of kind of people that had different levels of experience. So that's kind of where I went into, and yeah, loved working with young people. So that's kind of, I think, why I ended up over my career specialising more with adolescents. But I have also worked in pretty much every team. And I think that's just because that suits me, that suits my personality, my interests. I like the variety, so I've worked, after I qualified, I went into child protection, so safeguarding, because lots of people will say, oh, you know, you need to go and get your frontline experience and do your frontline work. I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but anyway, that was what I was advised to do at the time. But I've worked in fostering, I've worked in assessment teams, but I've quite a lot worked with adolescents with children in care and with exploitation, missing, serious youth violence, that kind of thing. So that's my kind of specialist knowledge. So really, I just wanted to say you don't have to always do the straightforward route in. It can be a bit of a wandering path. And I think that when, you know, I think I spent a long time having quite a massive imposter syndrome and thinking that everybody sort of knew more than me and had done better at, you know, getting into social work than me. And actually, you realise once you meet people and work with people that actually everybody's got quite a different background and way in, lots of different routes. So that was just kind of to give you a bit of an idea of my background. So I've been working in children's social care, all my experiences in children's, since I think, well, I started to do that volunteering and getting some experience about 2002 up till now. So and I've gone sort of from anything from a project worker, my first job was it was called Education Pilot, and it was working with young people who were at risk of permanent exclusion, and I would go into school and do some group work with them and try and sort of prevent them being excluded from school, I loved that job. It was really, you know.
Sorry, was that working with the Education Welfare Service at all?
I did work closely with the Education Welfare Service, yeah. So they would kind of identify the children, and I would work I worked in a small inner London borough, and the the head teachers and the youth offending service all kind of were quite connected. So they would put forward the children that they thought were quite vulnerable in terms of potential exclusions, and I would do some group work with them. And it was a pilot scheme at the time, so I didn't do that very long, but that was my first job. And my kind of current work is as a service manager level, so I'm, I suppose, one of the senior leadership team in a local authority. So, you know, I've kind of, gone through quite a long process of working in different roles and then going into management roles, which is quite different, as you can imagine, but still really interesting. So I have been awarded something called a Churchill Fellowship, and that's kind of why, I suppose, the focus of this morning, really. So a Churchill Fellowship is, as you can see, it was set up in 1965. It was to do with kind of Winston Churchill's legacy, and sort of that I think there was a lot of money put into it for kind of learning and development. So that's kind of the background. It used to be called the Winston Churchill Fellowship, but it's just called the Churchill Fellowship now. And so it's something where people get awarded each year to do some research. And the point being that you go off and do research overseas, and you bring it back to the UK to improve our understanding of the sort of area of work. So you can it's a bit like Dragon's Den. So I went to I heard about it about 10 years ago, I think somebody mentioned it, and I thought that sounded really interesting, but I just was never in the kind of personal life circumstances to be able to do it until about a year ago, and I was off work for a little while, and I was off sick from work because I had some health issues, and I think that's when you kind of refocus, don't you? And you think, oh no, actually, sort of, I don't want to just be ill and languishing on the sofa for the rest of my life. I'm going to do this application. So I thought, right, maybe it's my time. So I did the application end of 24 for the 25 fellowship. And it's quite a competitive process. So I think there was about 1,250 applications for this year, and I think there's about 113 of us that got awarded this fellowship. So essentially what it is, you pick your subject. They have categories that you go for, and you pick your subject and you say, this is what I really want to research, and this is why I think it would be important, because it's got to have some importance for the UK, otherwise they're just giving you money to go on a holiday, So it's got to have some kind of real reason for them to sort of fund you to go overseas and do this learning and then bring it back to the UK. So I was really fortunate to be awarded this fellowship. It was quite a long process. You do a kind of brief application, then you do a bit more of a kind of serious proposal, I suppose, and then if you get through to the third round, you go in to have some interviews in central London, which was the Dragon's Den bit. I had, I think, about 3 minutes to get this proposal off my chest, and I've never spoken so quickly in my whole life. I was sweating. I was like, it was so scary. But yes, I was really fortunate. So I was awarded the fellowship. And it really is quite a varied mix of research fellowships. So we're all in a big WhatsApp group. There's people, so you can see there's people doing, there's a guy that's doing, we call him Mike the Otter. I think he's on LinkedIn if you wanted to look, but he's done a fellowship, he's doing a fellowship, I think he went to America. When I start saying it, you're going to think it sounds cute, but it's actually not cute when we get further along. But he's doing this one about otters, because apparently otters are really good at finding people that have passed away in water. So they go down rivers and find bodies. And he's doing some research about kind of bringing that back to the UK, because I think they do it, it's more advanced, maybe in America. I'm not absolutely sure because he's not my category, but he's quite famous in our WhatsApp group, talking about his otter work. And then I know somebody's doing one about kind of coerced marriage. There's somebody doing a fellowship about kind of first and birth families losing legal rights to adopted children. I might have got that wrong, but that's so there's all sorts of things. Somebody's doing something about life story work, and then after the fellowship there's some options of funding, so if you kind of want to do some more. So I suppose the reason I've told you a bit more about that is because generally that's my focus of this morning, in terms of I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the things I'm doing. I'm only part way through it, so I can't give you the outcome yet, but I'm happy to come back and talk about it when I've done it. But it's also just to say, because I'm not somebody that's ever done any kind of, apart from in university, I've never really done anything kind of academic, in terms of research, and always felt a bit out of that field. And, I'm very much practice focused. You'll see that today in terms of sort of, I won't massively go into theory and things like that. We're going to talk much more about practice. But I didn't ever necessarily think that research was something I'd get into. And then I just really decided this topic was important to me. Over the years, it's become more and more something I thought needed a bit more of a spotlight, I suppose. So now I'm doing this research, which isn't actually very academic. We don't have to produce an academic kind of paper. I mean, there was somebody last year who did one. I don't know if he might have come to this university, but he's called Omar Mohammed. He is a principal social worker in Brent. Thank you. So he did one last year, and he went off to Philadelphia, and he produced a video, a documentary. Sorry, not a video. A documentary about that was about anti-racist practice in America. So I'm not going to necessarily produce some really massive academic paper. It's quite flexible about what you do. But my intention is to kind of create a blueprint of how people can work with children that go missing in a more effective way than I think potentially they do now. So that's a bit about the fellowship. I don't know if I've got, let me find just thinking about keeping an eye on the time. Keep my phone out. Okay, so looking at my fellowship kind of a bit more in detail. So like I said, I'm doing, mine is, so although the title of today is Children That Go Missing from Home and Care, actually my fellowship is about children in care. That's generally more my experience, or my more recent experience, and that's the title, Breaking the Cycle. So my particular interest is born out of some of my frustrations in work. So I'm looking generally at children that go missing from care and kind of how international services respond to them. But I've also got a particular interest in children that go missing repeatedly. So they're the children that services get really frustrated about and get quite cross with sometimes and a bit apathetic. We'll come on to it a bit more, but they can end up having their kind of vulnerability missed, I think, because people just feel a bit helpless. I'm interested in black children's experience of missing services because they are significantly overrepresented in the missing statistics. So there's a real disproportionality around the number of black children that are going missing. And we'll come on to it a bit more in terms of some of the detail. And then, my purpose is to kind of go overseas and come back and inform development and hopefully help to look at different policies and things. And I've picked to go to Finland, Norway and Canada. I'm saying Denmark because I've made a contact in Denmark and I might tweak it a bit. And that is really because there's some similarities and there's some differences in terms of social work practice. Although I'm not just looking at social work responses, I am looking at kind of police and other services. So I'm going to Finland and Norway in the coming months. I've already been to Canada, so I can share a bit of my experience with that. Okay, so I'm just thinking in terms of, just to kind of give you an idea of how I'm doing the research. Essentially, it's about making connections with people and going to see how they work and going to talk to them. So it's not, like I say, academic research. There's not a kind of particular methodology or anything like that. I had a meeting with somebody from Quorum, and I don't know if you're aware of Quorum, the organisation. It does a lot of work around policy for children and children's research. So I had a meeting with somebody who gave me some advice about kind of going in with an open mind and having some particular questions to ask, and that was pretty much it. And I went off and made some connections with people in Canada and was really fortunate that they were very open to meeting with me. So again, I'll come on to that a bit later, but it isn't, so just to say, so when I say research, it's kind of very much just making connections, seeing how people do it. I've done some shadowing, I've spoken to people and asked them kind of how do they approach this issue or that issue. So it's certainly not kind of the sort of research that might you would use in terms of one of your sources as kind of academic research, but it's got value in the sense of, sorry, yeah.
Let's ask a question about that. So it's very interesting with the research side of things, because a lot of students here are in legal.
That's okay.
A lot of the students here are doing research as well themselves.
Yeah.
So because I'm assuming yours is going to be publishable in some shape or form, how do you therefore sort of cover the aspects of confidentiality and data protection? Because if you're using people's data or information or things that they share with you, how is that covered in terms of the ethical?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have not put, so my hope when I go to Northern Europe is to meet with some care experienced young adults. In Canada, and the reason for that being that they're over 18 and it's that they're able to kind of, I think, to have a bit more informed choice about what they say, etc. There's less issues in terms of not confidentiality, but yeah, vulnerability potentially. In Canada, I met with professionals. So what I haven't taken from them is any kind of personal information. So we've talked about themes, we've talked about different policies that they work to, some of the kind of practical stuff, some of the issues that come up. But there's no sort of personal information going into it. So it really will be quite a general sort of overview of my experience of visiting these other countries. Some people have gone to a few more countries. Some people have focused on one country. Yes, go for it. Oh, I get it.
It's over there.
It's all right.
It's such a little thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just interested to find out what type of data you're actually gathering for the research.
I mean, actually, maybe it's a bit of a red herring to call it research, because but I suppose I'm not sure what else I'd call it. I'm not particularly seeking data. It's more how they work, how it differs, how it's similar, what approaches they use to. So it's more practice focused. So I'm not looking at kind of. I've looked at some numbers in terms of how many children go missing in Canada, that sort of thing. But we're not talking about anything more specific, really. So it's more about understanding experiences and feedback from people that are working with these young people. It might become a bit more clear as we go through, I think.
Yeah, I think that is still a form of data collection anyway. It's just like, you're collecting the experiences and the differences in how they deal with this children that go missing, and then you're going to compare them.
Exactly.
And see what the learning is that you can bring back to the UK. Yeah, so
that's exactly it.
Thank you.
I don't think I said why I chose the countries. So I chose Finland and Norway because of their approaches around sort of social pedagogy models of social work, relationship-based practice. They don't, I hope I'm not misquoting or saying anything wrong, but they don't use as much of a statutory approach to social services or social care with children as us. Canada is more similar to us, I would say. The reason I chose Canada was because they have done a lot of work around the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada, and there's been a big inquiry and a lot of findings from that. And whilst that's not exactly the same as me looking at some of the experiences of black children or unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, there are some relatable findings potentially around kind of that systemic discrimination and racism and things that they have got a bit further ahead on than I think we are. But I might touch on that in a bit. Okay, so today I suppose I wanted to think about what I wanted to gain from today and what I want you to gain from today. And as I thought about it, I thought, actually, what I want you to do is to be able to go away, and I don't know what fields you'll go in. You know, some of you will work with adults, some of you will work with children in very different professions, but it doesn't mean to say that you won't necessarily come across, even if you don't work in it, you still might come across children in a service that you're working in that have been missing. And I just wanted you to go away with some idea of how you would work with them and what the issues are that they face. So I'm not going into loads of theory here. I'm not going to I'm literally going to have one slide on the legislation. I have sent Leslie and Yohai some bits of research and some kind of websites that have got really good information if you were interested to look further.
Can I just check, when was that being uploaded? Because I asked this to Yohai and he said that you've got all the information and you'll be putting it somewhere, is that right?
Yeah, it would go into Panopto, it would go into the module, ready for you to publish, but it won't be published immediately.
Okay.
So you have to act on it.
So those attachments, I will upload them to the
Okay.
system today.
Or else I suppose I could do an extra slide and just put a load of links on that slide, but
Yeah,
whichever.
Either
There's quite a few.
Now, so I can upload
Okay, there's quite a few papers that were sent to me by somebody who was helping me with the application that are quite interesting and relevant. Okay, so we're going to kind of look at what is missing, what it isn't. It's not as straightforward as you might think. And then think about how you as a student social worker or a qualified children's social worker or an adult social worker, working in all sorts of different fields, might approach supporting these children. I'm terrible at PowerPoint. I don't know what happened there. So I was just going to say, everybody's experience is different. I don't know what any of your experience is in this room. Likewise, you don't know mine. So, there are people in the room that this will have been something that's been, touched their lives. So just to kind of think about kind of how we respond. I'm sure you're all used to that in your learning. And just, I'll talk a bit about language and different needs, because there's kind of social work language, isn't there? Social work terminology, and then there's children's language, and children's language and social work terminology does not always go together. So we'll kind of look at that as we go through. So what does missing mean? I'm not going to talk at you the whole session, by the way. We will kind of get involved. I know it's Monday morning and everybody's probably a bit tired, so I don't want you to all fall asleep and get bored. So in terms of definitions, this is the kind of main definition. Anyone whose whereabouts can't be established, where the circumstances are out of character or the context suggests the person may be a subject of a crime or at risk of harm to themselves or another. This one, the Department for Education. So the guidance for missing children is really old. It's not been updated for a long time. That's one of the kind of issues that I felt was needed looking at, because it's really dated, and some of the kind of statutory guidance we use is just not up to date with sort of children's current presentation. But anyway, so this is taken from the 2012, and it talks about a young runaway. People that have run away from their home or care placement or been forced to leave, or whose whereabouts is unknown. So that's the kind of basic definition. I don't know how much we use. I don't think we really say young runaway anymore. It's a bit. It's kind of got quite sort of stigmatising language, I would say. So in terms of the numbers, so there's around 160,000 people reported missing a year. That's generally steady year to year. And it's quite interesting that there's a large number of children reported missing, 72,000 children, so that's the individual children. But actually, if you go on to see, the incidents are much higher. So we're talking 330,000 reported incidents and around, 210,000 for missing children. So essentially, there's lots of children going missing repeatedly. Some children will go missing once and never go missing again, because actually maybe, there's I can think of one. So I was a kind of manager of a missing team in London. Somebody's banging the doors out there. We'll see a video from the team, which I'm going to cringe at because I'm in it and it's horrible. But I remember there was a boy that went to secondary school and he got lost on his way home, and he got the wrong bus and he got reported missing. I doubt that kid's ever gone missing again. So that'll be your kind of one-off situation. And then there's some children that are going missing 3-4 times a week for several years. So it's really varied in terms of the picture and what the experiences are. So children in care are at high risk of being reported missing. Gosh, somebody is banging that door. Okay.
Get used to it.
Oh, right, okay, fine, I'll tune out. So children in care are at high risk of being reported missing. So about 1 in 10 looked after children are reported missing, compared to about 1 in 200 children of the rest of the population. So there's massive difference. Reported on average 6 times. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's my experience, but I guess that's the kind of average. Fair enough. But in terms of that number, I think you'll see a bit more kind of what the issues are and why there is such a difference. it's definitely true that children in care are more vulnerable to going missing, and that's potentially because they've experienced a lot of trauma. They might be in, well, we will come into it, and you know, being at home in your family is a protective factor, even if there's difficulties in that family. But the number is kind of.
So, Laura, can I just ask a question? You know that number 72,000?
Yeah.
I know you were talking about looked after children. From my experience of working in fostering for a long time, if a child goes missing or doesn't come back a certain time, they could be reported missing, as you know, probably 2 or 3 times in the week.
Yeah.
And they just come back an hour late. They're still reported missing. There's still a CAD number, I think it is, yeah? So is that included in that figure? Because they're not truly missing. They
exactly.
just come back at their curfew. So is that included in that figure?
So that's exactly the point, and that's kind of, I think there's a few slides ahead which I'll talk a bit more about that, but that is essentially why I think there is a massive disparity, is because actually a lot of the time they're not missing in terms of, somewhere unknown. They're somewhere that is known, but they're just late home, or they're somewhere we don't necessarily approve of them being. And there are kind of, there's reasons why people report children missing in that way, but it's not very helpful.
Policy.
Yeah.
Policy procedure.
It's not necessarily helpful for those children, but I think there's a bit further on. So there's estimates that there's a massive underreporting of children going missing.
Yeah, I don't want to preempt, but there are reasons why these children go missing.
Sorry?
Reasons why these children.
Oh, well, there we go. That's our exercise in about 2 minutes.
Because there are so many children.
Yeah, there's a lot
missing.
of different reasons, but I think we'll do. I think we'll probably just do it as a group actually. But I think that's the next, possibly the next slide. But yeah, so you'll see most children are found really quickly, but there's a really small proportion of children who will go missing for longer, and that is clearly going to leave them extremely vulnerable. I mean, all children are vulnerable when they're missing. So yeah, again, sort of most missing incidents for children in care are quite short, although 2 days if you're worried about a child is extremely long time, isn't it? So nearly 2 in 5 trafficked children in the UK had kind of periods of being missing. And the rate of missing children in unaccompanied asylum-seeking children is higher than the general population. And again, we've got a little bit more of a think about that in a bit. So this is my only bit on legislation. That's the kind of statutory stuff. Ultimately, it's considered a safeguarding issue. There's safeguarding responses to missing children, and that is because they're very vulnerable. And if we don't follow those safeguarding procedures, we're missing kind of what's happening. Because missing is essentially a symptom of something, isn't it? You don't just randomly have a kind of, I'll just go missing for 24 hours. It's because there's a reason. So you can't kind of look at it in a vacuum in that sense. Okay, so here we go. So why do we think children would go missing? What are the reasons? So if we think about, you can think about there being kind of push factors and pull factors people often talk about. So push factors would be sort of something that would push them to go missing out of the home or residential setting. And then pull factors might be something that draws them out. So anybody want to throw something out? What do you think? Say you've got a 15-year-old child in a home. I'll give you a few. So there's maybe, if you're looking at a child that's living in a home setting with their family, so there might be sort of domestic abuse at home that might cause them stress, or drug and alcohol use in the parents or in the family members. So that's what we would call a push factor. So can we think of any others? Go on, somebody. Go on.
Abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's quite commonly kind of, that's going to push you out of the home, isn't it, if you're kind of experiencing physical or emotional abuse or neglect or sexual abuse. Let me think, what else? I mean, sometimes things like sibling relationships. Yeah, carry on.
Communication breakdown.
Yeah. So kind of
Mainly.
disharmony in the family home, and not feeling understood, that sort of thing. I think that's one of our case studies. Sort of not feeling you can talk to somebody. What about pull factors? What might draw you out of home or care? If you were, so something going on outside the home. Friendship groups, yeah. So you want to go, people go missing to go and hang out with their friends. Grooming, exactly. Yeah, grooming, exploitation, big pull factor. People that are exploited very often goes hand in hand with missing episodes and missing behaviour. What else have we got? I think.
Overcrowding?
Yeah, overcrowding, definitely. Yep. If you haven't got sort of enough space at home, then it's going to push you out potentially to go and stay with friends or stay with other people. Any others people can think of? Yeah.
I just want to say what Clary said. Miscommunication, but also miscommunication can be a part of child safe is going there. Mom didn't actually understand, and now mom's not sure where child is, or parents where the child is. Just a pure of one said something, one didn't understand, and the miscommunication becomes a problem because now it's assumed the child is missing, but the child would have communicated.
Yeah. Yes, there's lots of things like that where maybe there's confusion, people don't really know what's going on, or they've misunderstood. Some child said they're going somewhere and it hasn't kind of got through to the parent, that sort of thing. Those kind of things might be quite a short missing episode. We call, in terms of when people go missing, we in kind of social work and police speak will say it's a missing episode, but it's not very child-friendly language, is it? If you go to a child after they've been missing and say, I want to talk to you about your missing episode, they're going to probably roll their eyes at you because it doesn't feel very inclusive. But that is kind of what it's called in terms of kind of professional terminology. And let's have a look. So there's a few reasons. So there's some different reasons. It's not exhaustive, but you said most of them. So things like neglect, overcrowding, placement being far away. So I don't know how much you have knowledge of kind of current situation for children in care, but there are so few placements for children near their family or school, so they're sent. I mean, we've had people placed in places like Wales, Cumbria, Devon, and if you're not feeling connected to that area, you may well just end up running back to what you know and what's home. So that's quite a common one. So if you're really unhappy in your placement, likewise in terms of some of the things to draw you out, we've spoken a bit about exploitation, opportunities to use substances, just kind of feeling you want freedom, independence. That's some of those ones would probably be slightly older teenagers. And just being drawn out by friendship groups and things like that. So there's a lot, and there's probably a combination, right? Isn't there? There's probably a combination of the two that contribute to why a child might go missing. What's the time? Okay. Okay. I'm going to sit down for a minute. So I suppose this slide looks really confusing. It probably is a bit confusing because I'm not sure. Bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to sit. Oh, might have to edit that bit out. So I think I've talked a little bit about it, but the way that adults talk about missing is not how children understand it. And that's, I think Leslie touched on it anyway, so when somebody's reported missing, the kind of process is immediately, so somebody reports a child missing, whether it's their parent or whether it's a foster carer or whoever it is, that report goes into the police. The police are the kind of lead agency, so they will do a risk assessment. So they do an immediate risk assessment. How worrying is this? Okay, it's an 11-year-old who hasn't come home and it's, I don't know, getting dark, it's 9 o'clock at night. That would be pretty worrying, wouldn't it? That would be, you would definitely kind of be looking at that as a kind of high risk missing child. But then you also have the children who are sort of 16, living in a foster care setting, maybe an hour away from their friendship base, and they're hanging out with their friends all day. They leave late to go home, and they get in late, but they've already been reported missing. So that child, at sort of, maybe they've got a curfew of 9 o'clock, and at 8:59 they were fine, they were safe. But at 9:01, suddenly they're not safe. Doesn't really make sense. But it is kind of around sort of policy, and that policy being partly designed to keep children safe, but partly kind of is about professional, what's the word? It's a kind of, it can be very risk averse. It can be, you know, okay, child's late, that report goes into the police, because that will kind of cover the foster carers for any sort of comeback if something happens to that child. They've done the report, and you know, they sort of, there is some, I'm not kind of being negative about foster carers whatsoever. They're doing an absolutely amazing job, but often that's kind of the process that they're told by the social worker, you know, right, you know, if they're late, they need to be reported missing. Or, you know, sometimes it's kind of quite a sort of perverse way of like thinking about it, where people, I've heard people saying before about reporting children missing because it will be unpleasant for them, so it will kind of stop them being late again, you know, which is the most, you know, inappropriate thing to do. But yeah, so you've got kind of adult and professionals kind of approach to missing, and then you've got the child's experience, which is, I'm actually just with my friends. I'm not missing. I know where I am. I didn't tell you where I am because every time I tell you where I am, you send the police to come and get me, so I'm not going to tell you. So you get this real kind of standoff of, you know, particularly children in care feeling over-policed and over-scrutinised, and I think they are, you know, really the most scrutinised children in society. You know, if they have a bad day at school, by the time they get home, everybody in the whole network knows about it. And that kind of can drive them to become more secretive, which you'd understand. You know, if you tell your social worker all your friends and then you go missing, and then all your friends get a visit from the police, next time you've gone missing, you might think twice about doing that again. So it's a really difficult situation, because obviously we want children to be safe, and we want to have agreements that create safety, but we're doing it sometimes without that child coming along for the journey with us, you know. So yeah, quite often the child's perspective is, I wasn't missing, I just didn't want you to know where I was. And but you know, there can be situations where they know, you know, they know where they are, and they're not supposed to be somewhere, but they're still unsafe. So, you know, children don't always have the greatest ability to risk assess for themselves. But I suppose it's just to kind of have a think about, you know, how you approach children in that kind of situation, because quite often we end up doing it, with this kind of very risk-averse approach, and it doesn't engage our children and young people to kind of then trust us sometimes. So yeah, like I've said, these are the kind of areas of my fellowship focus. So I'm just gonna. It's quite warm in here, isn't it?
Yeah. One window.
Anybody feeling like they're overheating, or are you all right? Okay, that's fine.
Let us know when you want to have
Just me.
a break, because I did say 11, but you know, we can go with you and we'll have a quick break.
No, I'm all right. I mean, unless everybody's desperate, but yeah, we can.
Try and push on to about 11.
Yeah. So can I have some ideas? So I've put black children and families and children seeking asylum as kind of children that do face additional vulnerabilities and circumstances. I'm aware I'm doing that as a white person, but I'm somebody that has worked in the field a long time, and it's an area of interest in terms of my observations, and also the research kind of plays that out, and there's some research that I'll come to. So although I haven't experienced these things myself. I have worked in the field a long time and sort of noticed there is quite considerable differences. So what do you think might be something that is particular in terms of, let me explain it better. So if you've got a white child that's gone missing and you've got a black child that's gone missing, what do you think the issues might be for those black children particularly in terms of responses? Go on.
I don't know, cultural differences. I mean, I remember, something just popped into my head. I remember 2 instances. One was something to do with the hair care. The child was obviously had a lot of thing against the way her hair was done. And then another one was food.
Okay.
So these are the only 2 examples I've ever heard of.
So is that, you mean in terms of like, they're in a placement with somebody, or what we call a transracial placement, so yeah, not in the sort of
yes.
placement. Yeah, absolutely. So kind of not meeting their needs, essentially.
And not knowing that the hair, they couldn't just brush through the hair because it was always done, it's tangly.
Yeah,
tangled.
so kind of not
so
prioritising
it used to hurt.
Oh, okay.
So
that would be
the child.
That would be an issue, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So in terms of, but also in thinking about kind of how services respond. So I don't know how much you've heard of a sort of terminology called like adultification.
Yeah.
So there's that's I think probably been talked about for the last few years, but not much before that. In terms of and there's some research, like I say, that kind of plays out that when services have responded to black children who are missing, they are perceiving them to be less vulnerable than their white counterparts, essentially. Yeah. And in terms of the research, they are often missing for longer, and then they aren't always located by police. They are essentially returned themselves. So kind of you can see what the issues are around there in terms of the response. We've potentially got a more concerned response towards the white children than black children that are going missing. Yep.
Stereotyping.
Yes, absolutely. So
Assuming that black children...
I've come over.
Stereotyping, assuming that black children are more associated with gangs rather than them just being vulnerable, being taken away.
Yeah, 100%. So I've definitely seen that play out in meetings and things like that. So you'll have stereotypical views of black children being potentially gang associated, involved in criminality. Yeah, so their vulnerability isn't seen. Potentially that they're tougher, more streetwise. Those kind of stereotypes. I can think of an example. It's a few years ago, but it was not very. Not a million years ago, but we had a meeting where we were discussing a number of children that were going missing. And I remember there was a child discussed, she was about 15, I think, at the time, and she was a black young person in care, had gone missing a lot of times before. And the next person we went on to discuss was a white young person who was from quite a middle-class background. And there definitely was a different sense of horror about the situation that was expressed by, it was some police colleagues actually, but I don't think that, that's not, I'm not targeting police in that sense. I think that is kind of across the board. Yeah, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to go a bit off topic.
Hold it up vertically like that.
Oh, okay. Off topic. I worked on the unaccompanied asylum seeking team, and a lot of the kids that came over would go missing because they had siblings over here, and it's a bit of a conundrum, I'd say, to have the children, to have the older sibling come and visit in the foster care home set because they don't know, that older child and what they do. So a lot of the kids will go missing because they want to go and see their older sibling, and they're not kind of allowed to meet their older sibling at the fostering home.
Absolutely not off topic at all. It's a perfect example. Yeah. So that is that's often an issue, particularly for those children, that haven't got necessarily established family links, or they might go, they've often come to the UK because there's family here already, and I've managed an asylum-seeking children's team, and that would be quite common, that you would kind of have a child that would come over by boat more recently. It used to be by lorry quite often, but now it's a bit more by boat. Come into Kent, get placed in somewhere in, south of England, and they've got family in Birmingham, but they don't want to be staying in, wherever it is. Let me think of somewhere.
Southampton.
Exactly. So, say they're placed in Southampton, got family in Birmingham, and our processes don't really allow that to kind of then naturally happen. So that's exactly right. That's quite often a missing kind of reason, because we sort of say, no, you have to stay in Southampton, and then we will maybe do an assessment to see if it's suitable for you to go and live in Birmingham. But maybe that family in Birmingham hasn't got the space, so then we're not going to kind of agree to that. And then Birmingham Council will say, well, we're not going to take this child because they're Southampton's child, and it becomes really overcomplicated and very unchild friendly. But so that is a very good example. So there's particularly issues around adultification, racism, stereotyping, trafficking and exploitation. There is a lot of trafficking, I will come on to it, there's a lot of trafficking around the kind of children seeking asylum. And then, fear of authorities can be a situation where maybe a child's been reported missing previously and they've not had a good experience of services, and so next time they think, well, I'm not going to report them missing, because or perhaps had bad experiences in their own childhood. Okay, so this, in terms of the data, so black children are disproportionately likely to go missing. About 16% of all missing children are black, compared to about 6% of the general population. So it is, but then there's disproportionality through the whole system, isn't there? From kind of social care, care proceedings, youth justice, mental health statistics. That's unfortunately kind of across services. And like I say, they're likely to stay missing for longer and less likely to be identified as vulnerable. So we've talked about why. And this is, I love Missing People Charity. It's such a good charity for really accessible information. They've done some really good research, but it's really for someone like me who kind of struggles with a really long kind of academic paper, this is very kind of accessible sort of research that they do. So this is some research that these statistics are taken from, and I think Leslie's going to upload it anyway.
I've just done it.
Ah, well done. And then unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, we've talked a bit about. So often they're unhappy in their placement. They're placed a long way away from maybe cultural, communities that have kind of similar culture. So, they will be drawn to then go missing to be with people that kind of understand them, or they can, hang out with and have a sense of belonging. And sometimes there's a bit of a kind of difficulty creating relationships. I've certainly met some absolutely fantastic placements and foster carers of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who really specialise in it, but there's unfortunately not enough of them. So then, they might be placed with people who aren't experienced with looking after children with those needs. They're very traumatised. So some of the pull factors for those children are kind of wanting to be with community or culture they're more comfortable with, join friends and family, which we've talked about, and trafficking and exploitation. So quite often when children come, you will probably have heard examples yourself if you've been in that team, but so when they will arrive in the country, they will kind of, the Home Office sort of demands that all the children are age assessed now, so they all do these age assessments to kind of determine whether they're agreed as children or not. And during that, they'll kind of talk about their stories, and quite often they've been sort of trafficked from their start of their journey or from their original country, or somewhere on the journey when they've met people. That's often a kind of point of trafficking and kind of grooming. So children in care, we'll have a break quite soon because it is quite warm, I know. So we've talked a bit about this. So 1 in 200 children not in care reported missing, and then 1 in 10 children in care reported missing. So kind of to talk a bit more about Leslie's sort of example, it's really just to get you to think about kind of what the issues are and why we've got that massive disparity, because like I said, children are more vulnerable when they're in care. They've already been separated from families. They've gone through a traumatic history mostly. So there are going to be more vulnerabilities, aren't there? But actually, sometimes people are reporting children missing when they are not where they're supposed to be. So they're actually with their auntie. And we've deemed their auntie to be a bit unsafe. So instead of working around that issue with them, we'll report them missing to try and kind of, and I have heard language like, I can't think what was said, but it's sort of like to flush them out, people being reported missing. So the kind of over-policing response of children in care is really excessive, and you've got children that are kind of having repeated contact with police services and other kind of services when there's no way that their counterparts who aren't in care would have been reported missing. So in those kind of situations, if a child is living at home with their mum and dad, for example, and they're late home, the first thing that parent is going to do is not going to be call the police. They'll be like going around the parks, ringing their friends, seeing where they are, maybe kind of do their journey from where they're supposed to be going. You'll do that as a kind of parent generally, as long if you're able to. And sometimes the first thing that people do when a child's in care and they haven't come home on time is they'll just report them missing to the police. What that does is it really kind of it means that we're not able to focus the resources on the children that are really at risk. So in terms of some of the children, we'll do it after the break, but some of the risks to children when they're missing is substantial. I have known of children who have been killed when they are missing or experienced very serious harm. But then there's other children who are just, got the bus late. And so we need to kind of really make sure that we're focusing all our resources and, attention on the children that are really at risk. But so I suppose my kind of plea to you all when you go off into your kind of social work careers is to really think about, and we will come on to it, but to think about how we police and scrutinise children in care. They often don't have any privacy in their lives. Everything that happens, everybody knows about. And they like I say, they kind of have a bad day at school. By the time they've got home, there's an email sent to the network with the whole details. And I don't think that is the case for other children. And it's because we worry about them and we don't want them to come to any harm, but we do it in a way that is so risk averse compared to how we treat children who are not in care, who are living in their home families home. So that's, I suppose, to think about some of the data, because, like I say, there will be an overrepresentation, absolutely, but it's quite often we're using missing when they're not really missing. What we used to have actually is the police used to have a category called absent, so you'd have absent from your placement and missing from placement, but they stopped doing that a few years ago because children were being missed because they were being wrongly categorised as absent and they were really at risk. So they've kind of got rid of that a few years ago, which means that everybody is categorised as missing and it's not necessarily accurate. So yeah, so that's just kind of what we've already talked about. So in terms of some of the ones that go missing a lot, like I said earlier, there can be a real like helplessness feeling. Yep, do you want to come in?
Yes.
Sorry to take you back for a second.
No, Kat, please do. Otherwise I'll rush through.
I mean, just to look at, it's a bit of a sticky one in the sense that professionals will try to, they take a risk-averse approach because then on the other side of, I guess, the coin is a child is meant to be, let's say in care, is meant to be in the house by 9 o'clock, and then it's 9:15, they're not in there. And you're thinking maybe they're with their friends or something like that, but then they then report, which it could be they're just out with friends. Now the risk is, for the professional involved in that setting, should then anything go wrong and they haven't, again, reported, it becomes technically their fault. If the child dies out there, next thing, the whole case is going to panel, someone's going to take the blame for it. So I'm thinking for this to happen, for this risk-averse approach to happen in the first place, it means something would have happened, someone would have been blamed, and then now as professionals they're trying to protect themselves, because if now all the professionals are getting the blame for things happening to children, now they then say, okay, you know what, at the end of the day, for me to help other children out there, I need to protect myself. So it's a bit of, you want to respect the privacy of children and understanding from their point of view, but also now from the professional point of view, and being realistic. Calling it in as missing at 9:05, that's what it's going to do, because it's either that or they're now standing before the boards explaining why they didn't report it at, it's okay not to report it at 9:02, right? But should something happen at 9:03, that social worker or that manager is going to be before a board saying, why didn't you report it at 9 o'clock? Because that's just how our system is. They always look for someone to blame at the end of the day. And then the police would be like, we were not told. So it kind of becomes a sticky issue.
It's a really difficult issue because the police get really fed up with it because they're kind of, busy, and they're like, 9 o'clock, yep, Laura's been reported missing again, same every night, because she's always late home and then she's always reported missing. So they then kind of get to the point where they're fed up. I mean, that kind of leans into some of this, stuff around the repeat missings that I have a particular interest in, because I think they're really lost and don't get very much attention. But yeah, that a lot of that kind of policy and practice is, look, it's understandable, isn't it? Because nobody wants to be held responsible for a child coming to harm. But that's kind of where you've got to have your setups in terms of your agreements. There's something called a Philomena protocol. Don't know if people probably won't have heard of it. I've literally forgotten the name of, there's similar kind of protocols. And they have it in Canada as well, where the police won't accept a missing report from a care setting unless you have done a certain number of checks first. So tried to call the friends, gone, had a look around the community, that sort of thing, because they will push back and they will say, okay, it's 9:01, but actually you need to do your due diligence as a kind of professional. Sometimes you will get care settings pushing back again because they maybe only have one member of staff there, so they're saying, well, I can't leave the residential setting and go and look for this kid because I've got to stay here. So you have got a real difficulty in terms of the two positions, haven't you? I completely agree with you. There often are. That's the problem, isn't it, with kind of social work, is that when things go wrong, it's the social worker that does get the finger pointed at them, or the police. I mean, that's often the way, or education or whatever, those kind of settings. When things go wrong, everyone says, well, why didn't you phone? They weren't there, and so. But actually, no police officer is going to find them by 9:10, are they? So you've got to. I think there's got to be more strength and kind of credibility in that professional worker saying, okay, they're late for curfew, but that doesn't, if I'm late home at 9 o'clock, a person in my household is not going to phone the police at 9:01. They will do certain things, like I say. So there is more of an expectation that professionals will have to, or foster carers, or people in care sort of homes will need to go and do a bit more running around. But you know, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because you might have a child that has been missing since 12 o'clock. I'll come to you in a sec. You know, they've gone missing at 12 o'clock. Something serious is happening to them. You don't know they're missing until 9 o'clock. And something, you know, they are in a serious situation. How do you call it? It's very difficult. It's a very difficult one. So I certainly am not going to say go home from here and never report a child missing. But it's not as simple, is it, as just kind of someone's passed their curfew and so that report goes in, because then we're using a police response to a welfare issue, aren't we? And that's not fair. Children shouldn't be repeatedly coming into contact with police officers all the time. It's not healthy for them.
Is there not like a buffer time for children in placements? You know, like, yes, they're supposed to be home by 9 o'clock, but if they're not home by, you know, buffer time, after the buffer time, then report missing? Or is it literally like if they're not home by 9 o'clock, then you call?
Depends on the care plan.
It's different everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, it's different everywhere. It's different for each child. Each child will have a care plan that's kind of, and when they go to whatever setting they're going to, you know, those kind of bottom line sort of things will be worked out. You know, there might be a child that's really vulnerable all day. You know, there's no point in reporting them missing at 9 o'clock. They went missing at, you know, if they ran out of the setting at 11 o'clock in the morning and they were distressed and they're self-harming and they're sort of talking about, you know, feeling suicidal, you're not going to wait till 9 o'clock to report them missing. So it's difficult. It's difficult to navigate, but that's why I think those individual children will have plans that you'll need to look at depending on their circumstances. But they're usually, I mean, generally speaking, yes, people will kind of have a bit of a buffer time, but then, you know what, kids work that out. So then they're like, well, I know they're not going to report me missing till 10, so I'm not going to go home till 10. So it is a really difficult field to navigate, and I think that some of those care settings do feel quite vulnerable in terms of something going wrong. But we've got to come to some collaborative sort of way out of that, don't we? Carry on, yeah.
What I used to experience when I worked in foster care was that a lot of the young people
would be going to their birth families. So would be going to family members. So the carer knew where they were, but because they were not back at the curfew, they still had to go through that process. So eventually it was agreed in care plans, LAC reviews and so on, that they're not to be reported missing because they know where they are. But it was still noted somewhere on some system. But I think every local authority or fostering agency has their own policy. And I think you're right, Laura, about being risk averse. I think with the research and serious case reviews, that all kind of informs what happens with, you know, because people are concerned, you know, if children die or something, you know, happens like that so serious. So it does come down to the risk assessment of that child and young person.
Yes.
Generally.
Sorry.
To my understanding, it is between the policies and the guidelines of the authorities and the children. That's why children go missing. Maybe some of them, they may not be knowing, like as my colleague said, if they go past 9:02 or 9:03, they're going to be regarded as missing. Are there what can I say? Are there courses or sensitization training to those children, like the dangers of going missing, much as others may be at their family friends or at the friend's house, but the dangers of going missing and why they shouldn't go missing, so that we can reduce on that number from the 200
Yeah.
or so. Yeah.
I mean, that's our work as social workers. That's what we. So after the break, we'll look a bit more around kind of risk assessment and safety planning, and that will be kind of looking at sort of what direct work you can do with children to help them reduce risk realistically. I think there was a lady behind you who had something to say. So there's not like training as such, but that's kind of our job, I think, is to go in and
Just my experience in my first semester placement with the adolescent. So there was a day, a task was given to me, to call there's something they call a return home interview form. So they asked me to do that, to call a child that has missing. So what I want to say, or my suggestion would be, most of them that I called, I'm not missing, I'm in my friend's house. I didn't go missing, I'm so. So what we, like the social worker or like you, the senior ones, is there gonna be any reform or policy that we put in place when these children go out, either in their friend's house or anywhere? Can they, let me call my placement area. Oh, I didn't go missing, no, I'm in a friend's house. Can't we find something, a kind of policy that will let them tell us or tell the home that don't call for missing, I didn't go missing, but I'm so place? Is there anything that can help us to make sure when they go anywhere they go, let them inform us that I'm in so place, so we can't start assuming or calling the police a child got missing? Yeah.
So once somebody's been reported missing, there's a whole range of statutory processes that then come out. So once somebody's reported missing, once they've returned, the police do a safe and well check. So that's like literally, are you alive? Leave the house. And then social workers or somebody in the network, doesn't have to be a social worker, somebody in the network will do what's called a return home interview, which sounds very, I don't know how many children would be really up for that. It sounds like a police thing, doesn't it? In my service, we started to call them return home conversations, because it's slightly better language. People still know what it is. But once somebody's been reported missing and then have been found, that's a statutory process that has to take place within 72 hours, or ideally. Sometimes it doesn't. And they are really important, those return home conversations, because that's where sometimes somebody can talk to you about what's happened when they've been gone. And I've got a video in a sec, actually, that I'll show you about it. But so no, there can't be a point where a child's reported missing and then they call and say, actually, I'm not missing, because otherwise they'd probably all call and say, I'm not really missing, I'm actually at my mate's. And they're actually in a flat in, I don't know, Cardiff, with some, having been trafficked to sell drugs. So we would miss people who are at risk if we kind of had that process, wouldn't we? So I suppose what I think my advice would be is that you've got to build that relationship with that young person so that they can trust their people in their life to say, I'm going to this person's house, and that they shouldn't be, or it's not going to be a great, there might be stuff going on there that's not that great, but that's the work, is to kind of build that relationship, so that they're able to trust you and know that they can tell you where to go or where they're going, and then there's no need for a missing report.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
But once it's kind of once the process starts, it has to play out, and I think that we'll come onto it. But the point of those return home conversations is not to just fill out a checklist and stick it on the file. It's a piece of work. It's a conversation. It's a piece of work with a young person to really gain a sense of what's happened to them and what the risks might be. And I think sometimes it can be a bit like, let me just go through this form with this kid. Yeah, exactly.
Not a question, just an observation. A lot of children in care are quite independent children.
Yeah.
And obviously when they then get put in placement and they are, what are they? They're over policed, they're over cared for.
Yeah.
It's just a bit of a, how do you solve that? They're obviously independent because of the trauma and from the homes they've come to, and then all of a sudden now they're in a home where they've got to tell someone what they've been doing, where they're going, what they're eating, if they've eaten, some things that they've never had.
Yeah.
So, how do you not teach them that, but how do you,
I think,
meet that?
That is quite a common issue, and I think there are children obviously who've grown up really fast. They've maybe been, taking the role of the parent with their siblings and that sort of thing, and it's quite difficult for them to maybe accept care and support and love. Yeah, it's a slow one, I think. It is quite common, but then, you know, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because if we were just staying on their page and saying, okay, well, you just go and do your thing because that's what you're used to, then that probably isn't ideal. But yeah, again, I guess it just comes back to the relationship and sort of just being really gentle and, you know, going at their pace. But it's a common situation.
Do you want to have a break now? It's 11 o'clock.
Is it 11? Okay, let's do a break and then I'm going to show you a video.
When a young person leaves their house and they know that they're going to go missing, it's a thing where inside you feel scared. Like, you feel scared, but you don't want to show it on the outside.
My name's Karine. I am a missing children practitioner for the Adolescent Exploitation and Missing team, Evolve. Evolve are a team in Wandsworth who work with young people who may be at risk of or experiencing exploitation, youth violence, gangs, and young people who go missing. Missing is when a young person is gone, no one is aware of the young person's location, the young person cannot be contacted.
Missing is a broad set of circumstances.
Not asking permission to go out.
They haven't gone home when they've been expected to.
They may be having trouble at school and decided not to turn up for the day and gone elsewhere.
Their parent or carer or guardian might not be able to get hold of them.
Some young people may just go off to spend some time with their partner, their boyfriend or girlfriend, and not wanting their parents or carers to know.
They might be somewhere that they can't leave. They might be involved in county lines or something of that nature. Something might have happened to them.
I started going missing when I moved to my first residential care home. I didn't like the care home. I was used to foster care, and yeah, I'd travel like 2 hours back to London, back to South London to see my friends.
Sometimes they just don't feel like as comfortable at home as they do outside on the streets. Like, sounds weird, but when you've got a lot of friends who like claim they're close to you and they actually care about you, it's a thing where you get brainwashed by all your friends, the people who actually care about you. You won't believe nothing they're saying, because you think that they're just saying that because they don't want you to like have fun and that, you know what I mean?
The first times I started going missing, it was just for a day, but then the more I went, the more it went on to like days, sometimes weeks. Depending on the situation of where I was living and how much I didn't like it is how long I had to stay away.
When I'm allocated a young person who's had a missing episode, I try to reassure them that I understand, and to show them I understand why they've gone missing and how we can prevent them going missing in the future.
It's expensive going missing. You need a lot of money to buy things, food, travel.
I started to miss being at my mum's house, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't the same thing. I wasn't having dinner on the table from my mum. I wasn't having my own bed to sleep in.
Whenever I meet a young person, I'm very honest about who I am. So I distinctly let them know I'm not a social worker, I'm not a police officer, I'm actually a practitioner and also a youth worker. So I want you to be as comfortable as possible. And I also let them know that the information that they do share with me will be shared across the network in order to offer as much support as we can to help find a solution.
There was times where we had those key work sessions and they would talk to me like a young person, like a normal person. It didn't feel like work, it didn't feel like they were trying to get something out of me.
If you've got certain professionals around you, just got to use them as much as you can. They're the type of people that will help you, such that man said social workers, even man's yacht worker help, man. Like,
I had a few key workers in the care home that I really had a good relationship with, and I could see that they were getting worried, and they had long key work sessions with me, telling me about the dangers and why they were worried, and I guess just different suggestions that I could do to stop me going missing.
I've got other people, mentors that help me, that talk to man about certain situations, which made me feel more comfortable and just made me feel that really and truthfully the only place I do want to be is at my mum's house.
From the minute I get the allocated young person is to formulate a plan with their voice involved, sharing it with parents to prevent future missing episodes.
When young people are reported missing and return home, one of Evolve's missing practitioners will meet with the young person to complete what we call a return home discussion. We aim to create a safe, non-judgmental space for young people to speak freely about going missing and experiences they may have had while missing.
All those other people and those other care workers that I didn't get along with and was like, oh, you're nothing but a care kid. Instead of that, it was someone who was opposite of all of that. So that's what made me stop.
It's a thing of them trying to like communicate with me, but I wasn't giving them the same amount of like energy back. But the more they kept communicating with me, it was showing me that they actually do care.
Through working together, he was able to voice why he was going missing, what he would like to prevent him going missing. Because he saw I advocated for him, it started for him to have more faith in me and open up more. That helped me be able to advocate more with the professional network.
So from when I see that a person's there consistently trying to do their job and trying to actually help me, then that's when I can actually trust them and start to like believe the things they say to me, you know what I mean?
Where we're at today is that he's now returned and he's had no missing episodes for the last 5 months. We've now got him back in education, what he's thoroughly enjoying. We have positive one-to-one sessions.
I think it took someone believing in me and thought that I could do better than what I was doing. So I thought, why not give it a try and see if I can, prove them right.
Even when sometimes we do check-up phone calls and it's like, I'm good, thank you for your work, like that's the most rewarding.
It's quite impactful, that video, isn't it? The young woman that is in that film is quite involved in the National Care Leavers Forum, because randomly the other day I saw her picture come up on a sort of LinkedIn post saying about I think she has a lot of she does a lot of work for kind of sharing her experiences. But yeah, I particularly find the bit where she talks about somebody believing in her as kind of, that's sort of the moment it really hits home, doesn't it? Because it's about relationships. So I guess, what time are we finishing, Leslie?
Midday.
Okay, so if we use the rest of the time really to think about, I'm going to get you to do some work together. I'll have to work out how to do that in this room. But just sort of in terms of processy stuff, so this is kind of the general response to children going missing. So we've got a multi-agency safeguarding response, like I spoke about, police, social work, services, education, youth services. Evolve in Wandsworth is a really great team because I love them all, even though I'm not there anymore. But not all local authorities have a specific team like that, so some will do it differently. It's not all. It kind of depends on the local authority. We were very fortunate in Evolve that there was a lot of a lot of support and backing from the kind of from the director, who was wanted that team to be set up. But yeah, so there'll be a kind of safeguarding response. The police will lead, they do the risk assessment. So they'll do, your risk assessment might be different to the police risk assessment, and that's a conversation to be had sometimes, because I've certainly worked with some children where we felt they're really high risk because maybe we've known them a long time, but the police might not consider them to be high risk or as high risk. So sometimes those conversations need to be had between services and kind of sharing information. Then the social work team, if they're involved, will support. If they're not known to services, then that's, a missing episode would mean that the police would make a referral to children's social care, because it requires a kind of report, and then that assessment team would decide whether or not social services need to be involved or there needs to be an assessment. Sometimes, like I say, if the boy that on his first day of school got lost on his way home from school, I doubt that there won't have been any further action from that. There is sometimes, I do remember we would have kids that would go missing who were much younger but maybe had learning difficulties and things like that, maybe got out of the house, because I remember there was a kid that used to really like to go to the train station, and he would sort of get out of the house, and I think he was about 9 or something. And obviously that's really worrying. but it doesn't necessarily mean he needs a social work response. I think he probably was having support from different services, but yeah, so it depends on the situation. Return home interview or conversation or discussion, as we spoke about. And just kind of in terms of the ingredients of what works, we need young people to feel they can trust somebody. So sometimes that's not the social worker. So, you know, sometimes we have to be set aside not take it personally if somebody would prefer to talk to somebody else. That can be arranged. So somebody within their network doesn't always have to be the social worker. Families need to be involved. I think sometimes families in this situation feel quite excluded, like they're not being listened to. So we need to make sure that we're really involving families. They're often under great stress in this situation, but they also know the children well. Yeah.
How long does an evolved practitioner work with the child? Is it just a first point of contact after they come back home, or do they work further with them? And like, how many sessions do they do?
So in that team, there was a bit of a mixture. So you would have the missing practitioners. So Kareem was one of the missing practitioners. And what we did there, and this tends to be good practice, I think generally nationally people recognise this good practice, is that people get allocated a particular missing worker. So if they're going missing repeatedly and they've got a particular allocated worker, it gives them the opportunity to build a relationship with that worker, rather than having all different people coming in and asking them their story over and over again. You don't need to, if you know them, you don't need to do that. So for those that are going repeatedly missing, they can build up that relationship, but they would only be visiting to do that return home conversation. So if they didn't then go missing again for another month, they wouldn't necessarily see that practitioner. But we did have other practitioners in the team who would do longer term work. So we had people, social workers or schools would refer in. I mean, as I say, this is kind of how Evolve was set up, but there are similar teams across the country. So, a social worker might refer a child if they were worried about exploitation. There were signs that there was potentially some exploitation going on, or we worked with some young people that were in gangs, that sort of thing, and involved in county lines or sexual exploitation, often a number of, combination of all of them. And then we would do longer term work, and that would be really flexible. So some children who are high risk, you might see them a couple of times a week for 2 years. We were really blessed to be able to, we weren't a statutory team, so we were really blessed to be able to kind of do that flexible work. So I can't say that that's how it works everywhere, but there are definitely other services. Particularly in the London boroughs, I think there are quite a lot of those kind of teams where they do that relationship-based sort of youth work approach alongside the other parts of the network, so often alongside the social worker, and sometimes they'll do joint work with them. Sometimes they'll just go off and have a sort of less formal kind of setup, I suppose. So yeah, it's a good team, yeah. And then safety planning and review will come on to. Right, so I've got some case studies. I don't know how I'm going to work this out. I don't know what you think, Leslie. So I've got... They're actually written on a piece of paper because I'm old school like that and I can't work out. I can't do anything too complicated. So what we're doing for this exercise is just for you to identify risks. So what do you think the risks are? What is Omar at risk of? What are the risks in terms of, Daniel, I can't remember it, or Jamie. So we'll spend a few minutes, maybe up to 10 minutes, depends how long you need. Do you want anything to write on, or is somebody just going to make some notes?
Or me.
Yeah?
I was asking if country actually means being a drug runner. Yeah. Okay. Maybe not drug runner, mule. It's a mule. It could be a mule. It's like a mule. Yeah, it could be a mule. Because it could be voluntary, but it could also be exploited.
So can somebody read out, Jamie? Because not everybody's going to kind of be able to see the scenario. So if somebody can read the paragraph and then tell us the risks that you've identified.
Okay. Safety plan
Oh, don't worry about that bit for now. That's the next bit. Okay, so what did you identify as the risks around Jamie? What are you worried about?
The paragraph says Jamie is 13-year-old. She lives with her mom, dad, and brother in London. Jamie has been struggling because she is being bullied at school, and her mom and dad are arguing a lot. Jamie has had one missing episode and said she went wandering around the shopping center for hours as she felt really unhappy and didn't know what to do. Jamie has said she is struggling to talk to her parents about how she feels, and she would like support to do this. What would a safety plan include?
Oh, don't worry about that bit.
Okay. Yeah.
What's the next bit? Okay, so what did you identify as the risks around Jamie?
Yeah, we went through a whole thing. We said this is an early intervention, and we looked at the safety plans as what would happen in the worst scenario.
So what would be your worries? So not worrying about the safety plan for next, we'll do that next, but what are your worries about Jamie?
Was self-harm,
yeah,
suicide thoughts, exploitation, which would be even sexual exploitation, and missing permanently from home. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jamie's kind of starts at the start of the kind of spectrum, isn't she? She's struggling at home. She's being bullied. She feels misunderstood, and so she's thinking, okay, I'm going to just go and wander around the shopping centre or whatever, or go to the town centre. But like you've identified, that then means that she's at risk because she can be quite easily spotted, can't she? She can potentially be targeted for some exploitation. People befriend her, build trust, and exploit her. So her risks are quite broad, aren't they? Because it's kind of she's outside the home. She's quite young, isn't she? I can't remember how old she is. She's young, yeah. She's got no safe space like school. Yeah, she doesn't know who to talk to. So there's a worry there in terms of who might try and fill that gap. And so yeah. Okay, great. So, Omar? Yeah, go on then.
Omar is 16 years old. He lives in a residential care setting in West London. He sometimes stays with his mum and little brother, but not for long, as it isn't always safe for him there. Omar is frequently missing, sometimes for up to 2 weeks. He's usually found in Kent, and services there know him well. Omar has been exploited since he was 12 years old. When you do get to see him, he appears often despondent, unhappy, and unwell. Last time he returned, he had a broken hand. So, our concerns, the risk was the county lines. Okay. They don't want me to say it, so I want to say it. But yeah, he's at risk of pushing drugs across county lines. He was previously exploited from the age of 12. We're concerned about potential physical abuse due to his broken hand. It's open to interpretation why he has a broken hand. Could it be punishment from people he worked for, or people who exploit him for not performing good enough? We're concerned about him being unhappy, despondent, and unwell. Could lead to being a withdrawn child and lead to lots of problems there. We had, though, a couple of questions on, first of all, who is in Kent? Is the family in Kent? Or is it, we don't know who's in Kent, is the family in London? So who's in Kent is our first question. And where is mum and brother? And why is brother with mum if it's not safe for him to be with mum? So normally when you safeguard a child, if there are other children in the house, then also they have to be safeguarded. So why is little brother in the house with mum if it's not safe for one brother, which then leads to, the whole, like, a lot of contextual safeguarding that needs to happen.
Yeah. Great, lots there. You've identified the physical risks. yeah, his physical safety, he's getting hurt when he's missing, isn't he? He's presenting as low mood, so you've identified the sort of worries about mental health and county lines, all of which were very present. In terms of his background, he had been exploited from a young age. His brother was quite a bit younger than him. Mum did everything she could. There was no kind of worries about Mum's parenting. She just couldn't stop it, I suppose, because the risk is outside the home, isn't it? She's not in control of that situation, and he kept getting kind of groomed by people in a particular area quite near his home. So he ended up in care. Whether that was kind of the right path for him or not, we'll have to ask him at some point in the future, because it's penalised him in a way, hasn't it? He's had to leave the home, but his brother was at home because there weren't those same worries, basically, and he was quite a bit younger. Although I would say that I would actually put his brother in a worry as well, because then there is a lot of kind of around siblings, and siblings being drawn into similar exploitation. So he would be one to definitely kind of think about. But yeah, so that's good. In terms of Kent, I can tell you that what was in Kent was the county line. So he was on a So, well, I mean, in terms of like what he thought. Sorry, microphone. He thought he was really in control of the situation and going to make loads of money, and he really wasn't in control of the situation and was extremely harmed and abused whilst in that situation. I don't know what has happened to him. I think he'll be a young adult now, but he had experienced extreme violence. Some of the kind of things he was around were just a lot of drug use. Really scary stuff.
So that's quite.
So just for the room. So Daniel is in care in a residential setting, isn't he? Yes. He's across the other side of London from his family. Doesn't feel like he belongs in the care setting, but he does like some people. That's as far as I remember, isn't it? And he has autism. No, it's all right.
Daniel is 15 years old and lives in a residential care home on the other side of London to his friends and family. He is reported missing at least once a week. Daniel is sometimes found at his auntie's house, but it's not suitable for him to live there as she has significant mental health needs and can't care for him consistently. Daniel has a good relationship with his brother Matthew, who gives him advice and guidance, and is now 21. Daniel and Matthew lived with their mother when they were little, and they experienced harm in the home and were placed separately in care. Daniel is really talented in music and would like to do this when he's older as a career. Daniel has autism and struggles with reading and writing. Daniel reports that he does't like the care home, although he does get on with some staff. He feels it's too far from his friends. What could be a safety plan include?
Oh, no, that's all right. Yeah, leave that.
So we're looking out for the risks.
So was there any other risks?
Identify risks. Yes, we also identify Sorry?
The auntie who has significant mental health needs.
Yeah.
Which, if he's going there constantly, he's at risk of harm.
Because she can't care for him confidently.
She wasn't able to identify things like when he might need to eat and things like that. Yes. So there was certainly a risk there. But he also really wanted to spend time with his auntie, so it was quite difficult.
We also identify a risk of he struggles with reading and writing. So if he's doing that long journey and there's a disruption in the service, how will he read the instructions to know how to get to where he's going? Because that's a very high risk for someone with autism.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move us on to the safety planning bit because I'm mindful of the time. That's really good. So you've all identified the risk really well. But now we've got to... So we'll do just a group activity, I think, for the safety planning. So safety planning as a kind of overall function is used in social work a lot. So you might do a safety plan with somebody who's experiencing domestic abuse. You might do a safety plan with somebody who's got suicidal ideation and sort of self-harm. So safety plans are kind of a broad term, really. somebody will quite often say, go and do a safety plan, and you'll be thinking, I don't know what you're talking about. So in terms of this kind of safety planning with a young person, the safety plan we're kind of looking at is specifically around what's going to reduce the risks to them, what's going to help them go missing less. So I guess what I would say a takeaway could be, so quite often people get safety planning a little bit wrong, in the sense of, you've got risk and then you've got safety, haven't you? And they've got to make sense together. So I, for example, can think of a young person we were worried about gangs, we were worried about violence, and one of the things that somebody put on his safety plan was for him to keep his room tidy. So that's not do you know what I mean? That's like, it's just they just didn't really understand the task ultimately. So, what we're doing is we're looking at what are the risks and how do we mitigate the risk. And one of the things I would say in terms of safety planning is the other thing that people get sometimes into the habit of doing is they just do the professionals all do the safety plan, and then they circulate the safety plan to each other, and the young person got nothing to do with it, and had absolutely no involvement in it, doesn't know anything about it. And you might say to that young person, what's your safety plan? And they're like, what are you talking about? So it's got to be a collaborative piece of work. Again, it's not like the return home conversation where you just do it and file it. It's got to be, it's a piece of work, and it's got to be done with that young person, because they might not be able to guarantee that they're not going to go missing. For, say, Omar, to say to him, right, we don't want you to go missing again, would be completely unrealistic. So what you're wanting to do in terms of safety planning is think about what is going to make him safer. So, for example, you would do things like, I can think of that young person. So he would go missing to Kent. All the services in Kent knew him really well. So as soon as he would go missing, we'd get in touch with Kent and say, he's gone missing, we think he's on his way, sort of thing. And they would look out for him. And they had people like British Transport Police who would look on the trains and stuff, because he tended to use the train. So you've got to be thinking from the perspective of the young person, like, okay, he's going to be using the train. How do we make sure that he's safer on the train? You want to be talking to the young person about making sure they've got a phone that's got charge, and they've got a charger that works. Because quite often you find that young people say, oh, my charger's broken, that kind of thing. So you're thinking about, how do we make this the best case scenario? So thinking about another young person, not on the case studies, but I know that there was a young person, so I won't name the area, but there was a particular area of London, small area, where he lived, and he was at a lot of risk of violence from other young people. There was a sort of significant kind of gang issue, or sort of dispute, and he had been he was the target, so he was essentially sort of hiding, but he also would just then go off out, and because you can't stay in your house 24/7, can you? So what we ended up doing with him was we actually literally got a map, and we drew a map of his local area, and we said, okay, make sure you've got some money when you go missing, make sure you've got a phone, and then we looked at the buildings around the area, and we said, okay, there's a hospital there, there's I don't know what it was, I can't remember now, I think there was a Sainsbury's or something. And we mapped out where he might go if he crossed paths with somebody that he was at risk of and was worried. We would say, okay, make sure you know your route. And if you see somebody there, how can you get to that Sainsbury's really quickly? I'm not saying that you want to necessarily kind of draw the violence to Sainsbury's, but you've got to try and get that young person in a safer place. And chances are, if they get themselves into Sainsbury's, the people that are after them are going to go off. So we kind of identified, and hospitals, things like that. Because actually, if we'd have said on his safety plan, if you're worried and you see these people that are after you, phone 999, he wouldn't have done it. So it was pointless. So you've got to get into what is that young person actually going to do? We kind of literally sort of mapped it out, and so he knew that if he's in trouble, he could run to, and obviously he's aware of his surroundings because he's lived there a long time, but it's just talking through, okay, let's go through this scenario. If you see this person, how will you deal with it, essentially, you know, because they've got to kind of be able to sort of work that out, and you're there to kind of bounce those ideas off, aren't you? And then yes, you can write it down and put it in a nice neat plan and, you know, stick it on the wall, but actually it's about having those conversations with them about, you know, what's going to make this a bit safer. So for example, I think you had Daniel, didn't you? Yeah. So Daniel was somebody that we worked with for quite a long time, and he went missing a lot, and he had a great relationship with his worker. But one thing looking back, I remember having a conversation with her about was he would constantly go missing. And they did some great work together. And then I said, well, you know, he's an autistic young person, so how are we kind of communicating with him? How are you sort of doing that plan? And it was all verbal. And it was not a way that he could process the information very well. So actually what we then sort of suggested was he needs to have something, you know, written down. Not so much, I don't know how much work you've done with autistic young people, but, you know, they can sort of engage with things like social stories and stuff. He was a bit older, so we didn't do it in that way, but certainly, you know, she did it in a more kind of written form, because that would be a way that he could process it and absorb it better and have something to refer to. So you've got to kind of take into account those sorts of things. So in terms of safety and kind of getting a network around those young people, is there anything that you can think of that you would want if there weren't lots of waiting lists and lack of services that we won't talk about? Let's talk about an ideal world. Who would we sort of want to work with those young people? Who would we want to work with Omar? Yeah? Yeah? Yeah. So definitely. Yeah.
A group that might be able to get him out of the gangs and the county lines.
So in terms of, you're doing your immediate safety planning around immediate risk, and then you're thinking about what can I bring in that's going to start to reduce the risk of this young person going missing? What can I try and bring in to make life more enjoyable? So yeah, exactly. So CAMS, having a mentor or some kind of sort of somebody that's going to look out for them.
What about if we sit Daniel down and have like a conversation, trying to find out what makes him going missing? Look at the root cause of him disappearing. Can't we do that sitting down?
Yeah. You'll need to do that, because ultimately, like I said, you know, missing in itself is a behaviour, isn't it? But it's a symptom of something that's going on. So, you know, definitely we need to get to the root cause. But also we've got to bear in mind some of these young people really struggle to open up about what's going on, and they will really struggle, especially if they're scared. So, for example. Sorry? But yeah, I mean, no, yeah, exactly. So we've got things like, you know, neurodevelopmental stuff, got fear, people have been threatened. So sometimes it takes quite a while, but definitely you've got to start unpicking that. Yeah, absolutely.
Creating relationship.
Were you going to say something over here?
Yeah, I would allow Daniel to have reading and writing lessons, like have a tutor.
Yeah.
And also like music classes to allow him to express himself, and maybe stay in the residential unit and be happier being there.
Exactly. So yeah, trying to work on, so you've identified some of the things that he enjoys, and then it's trying to build on those so that he's doing the kind of enjoyable things, and then there's less of the need to run. I mean, placement location is an issue because we don't have enough placements where we want children to be living, so they are struggling because they're separated from their friends and things. But yeah, if we could build in something at that placement where he's got some access to music, you know, be able to kind of express his talents, then yeah, we're going to likely over time, aren't we? We're going to reduce that missing behaviour. Did you have something?
I was going to say, if Omar liked, you know, having some money, which is why he would, go on this county lines. So then maybe part of the process of rehabilitation is get him a job, help him find a job doing something that he likes. He's 16, so you can get a job, doing something. That way, it kind of limits his time going, because he was going for 2 weeks. So if he has a job, and then he understands the responsibility of the job, so he can't be applying for leave every couple of 2 weeks, to go away. So that could also curb that, that urge to go out to make money, because he's a strongly young boy who wants to buy his own stuff. So giving him the alternative option of the counter lines.
Yeah, so absolutely that. So I remember he had a mentor that was doing some work with him, and he was actually a really bright kid who had lots of ideas about kind of being a bit of an entrepreneur. So he started to design sort of business ideas and things, and I can't remember. I mean, he wanted to do all sorts of funny things that we said we didn't know if that's a very good idea. I think he wanted at one point to be a Deliveroo driver, and we were like, oh, I'm not sure about that. But then he was kind of looking at things like, I know he did a car washing kind of for a little while, that sort of thing. So absolutely that is kind of trying to harness that interest and motivation to kind of be, have some money for himself, but without having to go through the risks that he was going through. So yeah, absolutely. And that was something that was definitely looked at.
Like early intervention.
Yeah.
So the team around the family meeting and just getting everyone that's involved with Jamie, so they can hear her voice really, advocate for her, and the team around the family meeting, get school involved, get home involved, do some family direct work with the family, communication.
Absolutely.
Obviously mum and dad's always arguing, why is mum and dad always arguing? So she's
absolutely.
direct work.
And help her, because she was talking about how she struggled to kind of tell people her feelings, and she wanted a bit of support, so that you could do a lot of work with the family relationships and trying to kind of get her to be able to express what's going on for her. So yeah, real opportunities there, definitely.
The school could have accountability as well and do like counselling or LSAR.
Yeah.
So making the school be accountable for the bullying that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Try and work on that issue. And actually that might be a scenario where you don't have social workers involved with that family, and it can be done through support in school and things like that. Absolutely. So I wouldn't necessarily think that there would necessarily need to be a social worker involved. Bit mindful of the time. Okay, so is it 12 now?
It is, yeah.
Oh, wow. So I'll show you a picture just for the sake of it, because we've done. So that's when I went to Canada, and I went and spent the day with the missing I can't remember what it stood for. Manitoba Integrated Missing Persons something. But I tell you what, when I've done the full fellowship, I can always get in contact with Leslie and see if I can come back and what's cropped out of the picture actually is there was a lovely team dog at the bottom. I can't remember his name now, but we had but it didn't fit in the picture. But that's the kind of people that work on the Canada stuff.
When are you due to finish?
I think it'll probably be the summer. So maybe kind of come back in autumn or something, and you'll be done. I was going to say, if I send Leslie my LinkedIn, I'm very happy for anybody to connect. Whether it's about the fellowship or just general social work, more than happy for you all to connect and sort of ask anything you need to. I know you're up with time. Any final questions or comments?
You're doing all this research. Like, how would you implement it in the UK? Like, are you going to work with the government to do policies, or work with the local authority? Like, how do we make a change? So that's my plan, really, because I think I've worked in local authorities for years and years and years, and you can feel like you're very much in a kind of you're a bit just in your own sort of, you're doing your own thing over and over again. I mean, obviously very important, but you don't get the impact on the kind of national level. So yeah, the plan is, my ideal would be to go and meet with people that are making the policies and sort of and share the learning, so that we can start having a conversation about sort of improving practice and stuff. There's some really good practice in the country, actually. There is some really good practice, but there's some stuff we can do to change it. So that's the idea.
What's the one big thing you'd like to change?
I think involve young people and ask them what they need, and get them collaborating and participating, and stop doing sort of saying to them like, this is what we want you to do, and
Maybe probably when you get to Finland, the same thing as you do already, because I do the disability rights in my first degree, so I use Finland as my case study. So maybe their policy, because their welfare policy is so fantastic.
Yeah, they've got some really good processes. Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
Bring that to you.
Yeah, that's the plan. All right, well, listen, thank you so much, everybody. It's been really, really great to meet you all.